Hi, I'm Charlie Alsheimer, along with Dan Schmidt. Thank you for allowing us into your home today.
Are you ready? I am ready. Clap.
Charlie Alsheimer was one of those guys that when he walked into a room, the room instantly became a lot smarter.
I'm telling you what, the guy was one of the pioneers when it comes to actually understanding deer.
Charlie passed away way too soon, but he left all of us a great wealth of whitetail deer information.
Charlie really was the true deer whisperer.
So the first time I met Charlie was in 1995. He's almost 20 years into this. And I was just a rookie here at Deer and Deer Hunting. And I'll never forget it. I remember it like it was yesterday. Because when I started with Deer and Deer Hunting, which was about almost a year before that, was the editor at the time, Pat Durkin. He asked me my deer hunting experience. And my deer hunting experience at that time was mostly gun hunting. I mean, I grew up just like anybody else from the 60s and the early 70s was, you were a gun hunter. I took up bow hunting, but let's face it, we didn't know what we were doing back then. I mean, I didn't. So he organized a field editor's hunt here in Iola, Wisconsin, and Charlie Alsheimer showed up. And I have to admit, I was starstruck. So he gets here, and the first time I meet him, you know they say when somebody comes into a room, how they command respect instantly? That's who Charlie was. When you saw him and he got up to shake your hand, he got up to shake my hand in the kitchen, and I was just like I said, it was like meeting one of my baseball heroes. That's Charlie. He just instantly commanded respect. So that weekend, lo and behold, I killed my first buck with a bow and arrow. You would not believe my excitement. This was like unbelievable to me. I climb down out of the stand, I go over just to confirm that the deer is dead, and he's dead, and I go sprinting, which was almost a mile, all the way back to the base camp. And in base camp is Pat Durkin and Charlie Alsheimer. They're gonna have a meeting that morning to talk about magazine assignments. And I come bursting through the door, and I'll never forget the look on Charlie's face. Now you're talking about a guy who's at that point in his life has probably killed hundreds of deer, huge bucks. He's photographed deer every day, and the smile on his face, I'll never forget it. He was so excited, they dropped everything. And he came out, he goes, hang on a second, and he grabbed his camera bag. Think about that for a second. So the first deer I've ever killed with a bow and arrow, I had Charlie Alsheimer there taking my photos.
So when I was a teenager, nobody really bow hunted, and I wanted to get into bow hunting. And Fred Bear was the big name back then, and so I bought a recurve bow and had somebody really show me a little bit how to shoot the thing because, again, I'd never really seen too many people shoot bows. And so I started bow hunting. Everything was off the ground. Nobody used tree stands. And then I thought, maybe if I build a permanent tree stand, maybe I could hunt out of a tree stand. And so pretty much did that in the late 60s. And any bow hunting that I did was done out of a permanent tree stand. And then all of a sudden we roll over into the 70s and the compound bow comes along. I get the compound bow, find I can shoot it a lot better. And all of a sudden we got Baker tree stands. And you had to use the climbing stand to get where you needed to hunt. And all of a sudden along comes camouflage clothing. Prior to that, I basically used olive-colored coveralls, and that was the way that I kind of used as far as my camo. And so a lot of things came into being as far as hunting strategies. Couldn't use rifles. Back then, if you had a rifle and you went to the Adirondacks to hunt, it was going to be a lever action or a pump, a 760 Remington or a Model 94. And and nobody had synthetic rifles, stainless steel barrels running around. And so I've seen everything kind of progress along in my career. And then along came a lot of advantages or technologies, if you want to call them. You know, you had rangefinders that came into being, and better binoculars and better scopes. And so I see the whole concept today of scent eliminating suits. And so it's been a phenomenal journey, but it's still the same deer you're hunting. And I find that with all this technological advances, the whitetail still beats us. And that's the amazing thing as I look back on my career. Yeah, I've got state-of-the-art equipment, but you know, I've heard all the techniques. You see all kinds of things on television that seem to make you a better deer hunter, but that whitetail still beats us. I mean, if it's a one-on-one deal, we certainly lose more than we win. And I think that's the beautiful thing about deer hunting. And that's the thing that kind of keeps me going to the woods each autumn. It's kind of like, I was a big baseball fan and a baseball player growing up. Well, you fail 70% of the time, and even the best hitters. And let's face it, folks, the reality is you fail more than you win with deer hunting. And that's what makes it exciting.
Land of Whitetail is brought to you by Cuddeback. CuddeLink, 16 cameras, 1 cell plan, $10 a month. By Thompson Center, America's master gunmaker. Get armed and deadly with Easton FMJ arrows. And by Mathews Archery. Visit sportsmansguide.com today and see why they're the place to go to get where you want to be outdoors. Find the very best deals on the latest gear for hunting, shooting, camping, and everything else under the stars to fuel your passion. Shop sportsmansguide.com.
You remind me of a guy trying to drive a standard shift transmission the first time. Bucking along. Okay.
If I had to point out one aspect, one thing that Charlie Alsheimer left to all of us as whitetail deer enthusiasts, it'd be hard to pin down. He left us with so much. But I will go out on a limb here and say that the thing I feel he brought to the game, that he brought to the table, was quality deer management.
Quality deer management, or QDM, I think it's gotten a bad rap over the years because hunters have grown to accept only certain parts of it. And that was my biggest problem with QDM for many years, is that back in the 1970s, when this all started, QDM wasn't heard of. And it was actually being practiced in places like Texas. South Texas was the birthplace for QDM.
Welcome to Deer and Deer Hunting TV. I'm Charlie Alsheimer. It was only after I reached 40 years of age that I truly began to understand what stewarding one's land was all about. In 1989, while on a trip to Texas, I met with legendary deer biologist Al Brothers. During our meeting, he encouraged me to try a new concept called quality deer management on our farm. What we've learned since then has been a real eye-opener. In fact, it has helped me realize my dream of growing big, healthy whitetails on our farm in western New York. 1989, Deer and Hunting magazine, I believe, was visionary, and they said, okay, Charlie, go to Texas, interview Al Brothers, see what he has to say about this better way of managing deer. And I spent a couple of days with Al in South Texas in 1989 and also 1990, and got to know him, got to see his philosophy of what this whole thing was about, managing for better whitetails so you would have better hunting. And I can tell you at the time, nobody was writing about it. And 20 years later, I think realistically, if you talk to most people that are trying to do quality deer management, they would say, I love it. It didn't turn out to be the way I thought it would turn out. But what it did do is it had us look at the whole picture of stewardship. And what I mean by that is, yeah, the goal is to have better rack bucks, older bucks. The goal was to try to reduce the doe population, so we had a balanced deer herd. Another goal was to have better habitat. Well, in the process of studying all this stuff for 365 days a year, putting on the seminars, planting food plots, learning about soil, learning about seed, learning about what deer eat and why they need to have it, then all of a sudden, ruffed grouse started to benefit. Because you're thinking about habitat, you're thinking about the whole picture now. You don't have just tunnel vision. Now all of a sudden the turkeys start to thrive. Now all of a sudden cottontail rabbits start to thrive. And you looked at the whole thing and you said, man, this is incredible. And so I kind of have a warm, fuzzy feeling whenever I think about this concept because I speak about it a lot. I do a lot of quality deer management seminars. I'm a big believer in it. But the warm, fuzzy feelings are the fact that, there'll be those folks out there that will argue this, but I really believe deer and deer hunting had the vision to get this whole concept off the ground. And they wanted to take deer hunting to the next level. And the next level was, let's build a better program for the future.
Land of Whitetail is brought to you by TenPoint Crossbow Technologies. There is no substitute. By Sevr Broadheads, straight through it. I scent killer gold with Hunt Dry Plus technology. Apply it, dry it, and go hunt. B&W Trailer Hitches Tow and Stow, the last trailer hitch you'll ever need.
On today's episode, we'll be sharing. But the past 16 years, Vermont deer biologist Wayne LaRoche and I have been researching how shortening day length and moon phase affect when the whitetail rut will occur. And On today's episode, we'll be sharing with you our annual rut predictions. What are you shaking your head for? On today's edition of Deer and Deer Hunting, I don't want to do that. For the past 16 years, Vermont deer biologist Wayne LaRoche and I have been studying how shortening day length. What's the deal with the plane? On today's episode, we'll be sharing with you our annual rut predictions. For the past 16 years, Vermont deer biologist Wayne LaRoche and I have been researching how shortening day length and moon phase affect when the whitetail rut will occur. It's been a fascinating study, and I can tell you that based on our research, that this year's rut will be spectacular. So stay tuned for the details. Let's try it again.
So one of the final things he showed us was how we could truly understand deer behavior during the rut. How bucks behave during the rut, how does behave during the rut, and what causes all this. He showed us that throughout the seasons. He did a book on it, Whitetails Throughout the Seasons. He showed us how deer live, how a doe lives throughout the year, and how a buck lives throughout the year, and how these things are polar opposites sometimes, especially during the rut.
We've got basically 3 ruts. You've got a synchronized rut, you've got a classic rut, and you got a trickle rut. Now what are they? Well, a synchronized rut is when that doe's estrogen level peaks, the buck's testosterone level peaks, and the full moon all happens at the same time. November 1st is when the estrogen level peaks and the testosterone peak. And whenever we've seen a full moon around the peak in those 2 hormones is the best rut. It's the most spectacular. And it doesn't matter whether we talk to some guy in Maine that's trying to collect information for us or the guy in Saskatchewan that's doing it. It seems to be everything kind of comes together. When everything happens around November 1st, boom, it really explodes. Now how about the classic rut? Well, it used to be, the old timers would say, I want to be hunting somewhere Veterans Day. And that was pretty much it. Well, 2 out of 3 years, that's going to be great. But there's going to be an outlier, and the outlier is going to be the trickle rut. And whenever you have that full moon hit, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 6 November to 13 November, in that time frame, you're going to have a mid-November rut. And those guys that hunt someplace mid-November are just going to be, it's going to be great. Now the trickle rut. And what basically happens is you have a full moon that's going to hit 16, 17 October, and another full moon that's going to hit 16, 17 November. And what will basically happen is those shortening day length gets to the point, and some of those does wind up queuing off of that October moon. And late October, early November, you get a pop in the rut, and then Thanksgiving week you get a pop in the rut, And in between, it ebbs and flows, ebbs and flows. A guy can be hunting someplace 10 November, and it's going crazy. Calls his buddies on the phone, you better get here because, man, it's rocking. They get there a day later, and it's dead for 5 days. And they say, you're crazy. And that trickle rut is the tough one. It's amazing.
He received a lot of flack for it, especially in the scientific circles. So the scientists are saying, well, wait a second, you're trying to tell us that the autumnal equinox is going to trigger estrogen levels and testosterone levels in deer. We can't prove that. Charlie's saying, I don't have to prove it. I'm watching it every single year.
Clap, real quick, Charlie.
How'd that work?
Worked out great.
Okay.
All the way back, 1979. That was the first article I ever saw on mock scrapes. It was by Charlie Alsheimer. Charlie did a piece on how he was actually using, there wasn't a lot of sense back then. They didn't have Magnum scrape drippers and golden scrape and all that stuff back when Charlie was first doing this stuff. So what did he do? He went ahead and used excretions from dairy cattle. He urinated in scrapes, that type of stuff. And one of the big things he did is he went around attaching licking branches, going ahead and wiring them to trees. You know, in this case, this is a branch that's actually attached to the tree that I just wired down. You know, sure, we're lucky now. We get to use primo products that stack the odds in our favor and all this stuff. Really, all this stuff came from people like Charlie originally. Charlie John Azoga with his scrape study. You know, they were the pioneers.
When you go back to the 1970s, when people talked about mock scrapes, specifically Roger Rothar, Lenny Rue, it was geared towards the rut. Well, fast forward 30 years, and I can tell you that what you see is these whitetails will work these licking branches 365 days a year, whether they've got antlers or not, and they're leaving scent. The whitetail's world is all about making scent and following scent and being driven by scent. And so these branches, I mean, where my trail cameras and whatnot are set up, I mean, we have these mock licking branches there the whole year. And because it does more than just let them leave scent, it creates behavior. And what I mean by that is, if you can hang one of these mock licking branches in a specific spot that may be your honey hole that you like to hunt, you're going to start to find these whitetails will go to it, just like the dog goes to the fire hydrant on the end of the corner. And every year my son and I here on our farm, we kill does as they're working licking branches.
We're just lucky that today, somebody like me, I can go ahead and run with it. Now, some of the things that, between what he taught me and what you figure out on your own, we've got a stand right there. Point those licking branches back towards that stand. Think of the shot angle. That deer comes up to work that scrape. Right there's the pawed earth mark they made. Look, that's a beautiful shot angle from that stand. And at the same time, the deer's attention. Where's the deer's attention? Sure is not paying much attention to me up there drawing my bow, while that deer's attention is working that licking branch facing away. Now, we can do all sorts of things to take this up another level. But quite honestly, a lot of it came from Charlie. Charlie and his work from deer and deer hunting. Now, that sets the stage for people like me to pick up the ball and run with it. And I'm forever in his debt because of it.
And now here's a tip from Charlie with some of the best deer hunting advice I've ever heard. Thanks, Charlie.
You know, as I kind of reflect back on my past and I think of the different ways that I've hunted whitetails over the years, it's been pretty amazing journey I've been on. You know, when you look at this whole concept of deer hunting, I mean, you have to look at failure as victory. And when I look back on my career, what do I remember most? I remember the failures. I mean, I can remember some of the times where I did some stupid things that cost me a great deer and didn't have the gun loaded because the hunter safety thing said, when you go up to a fence, make sure you cross it with an unloaded weapon. And there I am in the late 60s with a shotgun, I've got a fence I'm coming up on, I've got an empty shotgun, I look over the fence, there's a 140-inch whitetail. And by the way, folks, a 140-inch whitetail in the 60s in New York State was like a Boone and Crockett 170-inch in the Midwest. And there he stands, and here I've got a gun in my hands, and I got no bullets in the gun. That's a failure. But I've remembered it my whole life, vividly, almost moment by moment. And so when you look at that whole process, the failure end of things is really what makes you a better hunter. And as you look at the things you'll do this fall, you're going to fail. But those failures will probably make you a better deer hunter. And I think that from my own experience, it's made me a better deer hunter. It's made me a better photographer. And I think it's also made me a little bit better communicator when I talk to people, because don't look at every goof up you make in the woods as something that's going to be a killer at the end, because it's not. It's going to make you better at the end.